Hello there, friends and sane persons. My name is Kyle, and it's Wednesday, which means, of course, that it's time for another episode of Wednesday Whimsy. I'm still in my upstairs location as my game room is slowly but surely being repaired. But that's all right. I can record from up here as well, hopefully. Anyhow, as you can see from the description, today we are talking about my top 10 abstract games. Now, if it's your first time joining, or even if not, Wednesday Whimsy is a short Wednesday afternoon or Wednesday evening show, usually around 7 p.m. on Wednesdays, where I will talk about a board game or a board game adjacent topic or do a top 10 list, something like that. And that's what we're doing today. As I mentioned, we're talking today about abstract games. Now, you may say, well, what is an abstract game? And honestly, it's kind of like, profanity, right? In that you kind of know it when you see it. It's a hard term to define, but ultimately, all board games are really abstracted, right? We're taking some sort of a theme, and we're reducing it down to cardboard and plastic and an experience where there's some sort of winner or loser, right? I mean, there's an abstraction that exists in just about everything to do with games, but an abstract game is usually a game where the theme often comes second, right? It's there sometimes as a trapping, something to think about, but really you're kind of moving things around a board or trying to get things in a certain order, and that's kind of how the game ends up working, right? There's usually a victory condition and then some sort of non-thematic steps that you're going to take in order to get to that victory condition. It's really a hard thing to describe or to define, but these all kind of fit in my definition of abstract games. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started. There's no need to drag this out. Let's talk about my number 10. All right, my number 10. So this is a game I talked about. I rarely talk about this game, even though I quite enjoy it. It's a game that I talked about when I did my two-player game list because for some reason a lot of abstract games work really well at two. But this game is called For the Crown. So For the Crown, if you don't recall, or even if you do, is a weird hybrid between a deck building game a la Dominion and chess. So chess is sort of the quintessential abstract game, and in For the Crown, what you have is a chessboard and chess pieces. I mean, they're these flat little cardboard things, but you've got these chess pieces with different symbols on them, and each one does something different. And so you're building your deck. You're going to buy new cards, and you can then use the cards either to move the pieces or to put new pieces on the board. And it's going to be unlike any kind of game of chess that you've really ever played, right? Just because you're not going to have your standard pieces on the board. It's going to be different things. The ultimate goal is to checkmate the opponent. But you can have more than one king, or you can have the heir or the crown prince or something. So when the king goes, a new king comes out. There's different things instead of sort of your queen and knight. They all have different abilities. You can use them to buy new cards and get money, sort of deck building style. But then ultimately you're moving around this board, and it's a game that's really unlike anything else. Unfortunately, it's not a beautiful game. It's kind of it's kind of ugly. It's not very high quality, and I don't know if it's really very available anymore. But it's really something special, something interesting, something very abstract, and my number 10 abstract game, For the Crown. So let's move on now to my number. All right, my number 9 abstract game is a game. So this one, I kind of forget. My mind kind of goes blank when I try to think about when this game came out. But it's a Tetrisy style game, right? Polyominoes, as some people would say it. This is a game called Project L. So Project L, just like in sort of all of the games of this ilk, you're trying to get these shapes and fill in cards, but or fill in spaces. But the way the spaces you're filling in are these cards, and you've got these 3D plastic pieces, and you're trying to put them in. And each turn you can do different actions. You can take new cards. You can buy different pieces, upgrade pieces, which means make them bigger, and you're ultimately trying to fill in your cards with as few pieces as possible so that you can fill in, more than one at once. You can place more than one of the same shape, for example, on a turn, and you're trying to make it as efficient as possible. It's very black and white, literally, with the only color being these pieces. But it's an interesting game that really doesn't feel like anything else. Very abstract. I mean, there's no theme at all. You're just filling in cards, and you're trying to fill in the ones that are worth the most points. You'll see that often more difficult, easier cards are going to give you fewer points. Sometimes they'll give you a piece as a result of completing it, whereas more difficult ones will often give you more points. And that's really what you're doing. Just going to go through that, do it again and again until the game's over. It's very simple. This one works with any of the possible player counts. It's not that great as a solo game, but as a 2, 3, 4 player game, it's really good. Very fast, very light, and really nice pieces in it. Whereas For the Crown looked terrible, this game actually looks quite nice. So that's my number 9 abstract game Project L. So with Project L behind us, let's move on to my number 8. All right, my number 8 is an old game that was much beloved by people for a while, but I never played it when it was old. I've only ever played the new version, and the new version, when it came out, it's really quite excellent. The game is... trying to think when it originally came out. I won't be able to find that. But it's a game called Fjords. Let me put that up here. And what you're doing is building fjords. I mean, sort of. So the game really has 2 phases. The first phase is kind of a tile laying phase, and you're going to take turns placing these dominoes or these little hexagonal tiles out, and they've got a match on different sides, and the way you're placing them matters, because the way that you're going to score in the game is the second half. Once all the tiles have been placed out, then you're going to try and you're going to place your workers out next to your little huts, and the goal is to sort of cut off area almost like through the desert, so that only you can be in there and have sort of the most territory, make your workers last the longest, really. And that's really what you're doing here. You're trying to have the most. Think of it like almost like area control at the end. It's an unusual game. The rules are a little bit weird, especially around how you kind of cycle through tiles when one of them doesn't fit. But ultimately, as a 2-player game, especially 3 and 4 is okay, but as a 2-player game, especially, it's really fast and also really tight. As every move you make is trying to position yourself for this end game, so that when you're there, you're able to take the most control possible and spread your clan out all over these fjords. As with most abstract games, there's really no theme here, although you'll see that there are some fjords in the landscape and some ice and some green land, I guess. Whatever. But it's a really fun game. It's not very long. It's recently been republished, so this one is available. And honestly, it's pretty good. My number 8, Fjords. All right, let's go on now to my number 7. My number 7 is, let's take Fjords away. That's not my number 7. My number 7 is a game that everybody knows about. This has got to be the most popular abstract game around these days. It is a big award winner. The game is Azul. Now, there's several different versions of Azul. There's Azul Stained Glass, Azul Summer Pavilion, Azul Queen's Garden. and there's a new chocolate Azul coming out. Okay. Uh, Honestly, I like stained glass best of all, but I'm putting just regular Azul on this list because that's kind of the one that I end up getting to play the most. In Azul, what you're doing is it's very simple. On your turn, you're going to take all of the tokens, all these tiles of one color from one area, either one of these factories or this middle area. And then you're going to place them onto your board. You've got to place them all in one row. And then at the end of the round, any row that's full, you're going to move that tile over and place it on its space. And you'll score points based upon what's above it and what's horizontally, vertically adjacent to it. You're trying to build large rows and columns so that you get more points. You get bonus points by filling rows and columns as well, also by placing all the tiles of one color. Very fast. It's always at least 5 rounds, depending on how people play. It could be longer. And you just sort of score and see who has the most points. It's just that easy. There's no theme here at all. Even if you go into the stained glass theme or the summer pavilion, it's just placing tokens on the board, trying to arrange them in certain ways, trying to make the most use of your turn when you can pick something so that it's going to do you the most good. There are penalties if you're not able to place things, and so you're also managing that. Ultimately, it's all about the points, but the mechanisms of the game are very simple, and so it really resonates well with a lot of people. Lots of people like this game. I'm included in that, and even though I prefer the stained glass one, the base Azul still holds up very well. Very interesting game, a lot of fun, and my number 7 abstract game, also a Spiel des Jahres winner, Azul. So with Azul out of the way, let's go on. I guess we're on number 6 now. Oh, let's put Azul away. So my number 6 is a game that came out. I played it last year at Gen Con for the first time. But it's a game with a terrible title. You'll never find it, which is why I wrote it out exactly like that. It is called Caesar Sees Rome in 20 Minutes with 2 exclamation points. Let's see if I can find it online to show some pictures of it. The way that it was described to me is fairly accurate, but it's kind of like that old game that you played with your brother or sister during church, where you, when you're supposed to be paying attention, where you would draw a bunch of dots on a grid and you'd draw a line or two connecting them, and you were trying to complete the boxes and write your initials in them. It's kind of like that, but it's definitely, there's more game to it here. So what you're doing is you take the role of one of 2 factions, Caesar or Pompey, but there's no special abilities. I think just Caesar goes first. And what you're going to do is every turn you're going to have a hand of tokens. You're going to place 1 token out. It's got to match the symbol that it goes on or be wild. Each token has 2 sides to it. I don't know if we can zoom in on those. Well, we can. Oh, there we go. Each token has 2 sides to it. Let's see if I can. Oh, there we go. And there's going to be numbers as well as symbols. And so the symbol just matches the space it goes to, and then the number is supposed to is going to tell how much power is in that region. Ultimately, your goal is to have the most power in each region at such time that it's completely closed off. If you do, you win. You get to place one of your control tokens in that region, but these yellow things in the middle, the person who places the last token in a region gets to take that, and that gives you a powerful special ability. It could give you more tokens in your hand. It could give you an extra turn. It could let you cancel another player's token, or the all-powerful Senate token, which gives you bonuses for how many senates you control if you also win the territory. So it kind of snowballs into a victory if you're able to get a lot of those. You're going to place a token, but it's very tight, right? Every turn, you're worried that you're setting somebody up for something. Very, there's really no theme here, as with all of these abstract games, but really very interesting. interesting headspace that's going on here. I keep saying it's interesting because it really is. I really like Caesar sees Rome in 20 minutes. It's 20 minutes is honestly a little bit long. It's a very fast game, very short, but very tight and very tense all the way through. Also very abstract. So anyway, that is my number 6. Caesar sees Rome in 20 minutes. Let's go on now to my number 5. Okay, my number 5 is the game on everybody's lips these days. This game came out last year at some point, and I remember when I found it, I was very taken with it, and my family was as well. It's just a very popular game. It recently won the Spiel des Jahres for this year, which is of course a big board game award. The game is Cascadia. Let's hit that there. So Cascadia is, I mean, the theme is something about wildlife, you know. But what you're doing in Cascadia is you're going to be drafting, you're selecting, I guess. There are 4 things. There's 4 pairs, a tile and a token. And each turn you're going to take 1 pair. There are some tokens, some special acorn pinecone tokens you can get. And if you spend one of those, you can draft a non-matching pair, for example. But you're then going to place it out into your landscape, and you're going to place the animal on a space that it can inhabit. It could be the same one you took, or it could be a different one. All the animals are going to score in different ways based upon their patterns or what's next to them or what's not next to them. And then at the end of the game, you're going to score for largest areas of each of the different terrain types. So it's pretty simple in terms of what you're scoring. Slight variations each game, but it's very fast and very engaging because nothing ever comes up the way you want it to, and there's just really a lot of interesting tension as you sort of see what's going to be available. Try and work toward 1 or 2 of these goals. There is a solo mode, and I played the solo mode a lot actually. It's okay. It's not terrible. It does have sort of different challenges you're trying to go for, and I like that. So it's a fun way to play the game, but it definitely shines at 2, although with 3 or 4 it's also pretty good. Very short, very fast, very pretty, nice sort of tactile wooden pieces that are fun to pull out. I wish they were printed on both sides, but that's not a big deal. Anyway, it's just a really interesting game and a deserving winner of the big board game award this year. My number 5, Cascadia. So let's move on now to number 4. Where's number 4? Here we go. My number 4 is a game called Warchest. So Warchest is a difficult one to describe. The interesting thing about the game is it comes in this large chest, hence the name, I guess. But what you're doing is it's got these nice poker chips in it too, and you're trying to take over a certain number of these territories. And let's see if I can show you. Here's the box. So you've got this board. Well, here we go. Here's a picture. So there's the board, and there are these territories, and you want to control them. And what you're going to be doing, though, is you've got a certain number of tokens that you're going to be using, different types of tokens. It's 4 usually. And then there's different numbers of chips in each pile. And you're going to be, that's kind of all you've got for the game. So you've got 2 asymmetric armies, really, because they've got different special abilities. And on your turn, you're going to be drawing tokens out of a bag, and you're going to be playing them either to buy new chips, or you're going to be playing them to put a token out on the board, or you're going to use it to play the chip to move and activate a particular token. So there's this interesting balance going on as you try and make sure that not only do you have a lot of tokens in your bag? So there's some bag building elements to it. But also, are you able to activate all the tokens you've got out there? Because if you put all of, I don't know, your little raven thing out there, you won't ever be able to activate it. It can't do anything because it only activates when you pull one of those tokens out of the bag. So it's a really interesting decision space that's going on in there. The rules are pretty simple, although there are a lot of special abilities that you're going to need to learn. Obviously, there's only 8 in each game, but there are quite a few, especially with the 2 expansions. Although honestly, I wish there were more expansions, and I wish there were a bigger box. I really like Warchest. I don't get to play it that often. For some reason, it doesn't scream out to people. But whenever I get a chance to play it, I'm really excited. It just is something. It's something special. Also, the tokens are really quite nice. Very thick tokens, nice draw bags, high quality all around. This game can be played by up to 4, but it really should only ever be played by 2. Anyway, it's great every time you can get to it, though. That's my number 4, Warchest. So let's move on now to the top 3 with my number 3. Alrighty, my number 3. This might have been on my 2-player list again. In fact, I think the rest of these might have been on there, but that's okay. They're abstract games, so they belong on this list as well. My number 3 is a chess-like game. I already mentioned For the Crown is a chess-like game. This is the best chess-like game. It is The Duke. So The Duke is, as I mentioned, a chess-like game where you've got one character, the Duke, and you win by capturing your opponent's character. And you have your pieces. Each turn you're going to move one piece, really. You also have the ability, though, to add to draw additional pieces out of your bag. You've got a bag. Everyone has the same normally setup of different tokens, but only a certain. But you start with the same ones on the board. Oh, wow, these ones look like a cheap cardboard version. Mine are wooden. Anyway, look more like this. Oh, those are the blank ones. Well, I'm sure I'll be able to find something eventually. Here we go. So instead of moving or activating a piece, you can draw a token out of your bag and add it to the board, which increases your forces. Oh, these look like the complicated ones. All right. Here we go. And each piece moves differently. For example, and you can see on the piece how it's going to move. The priest, for example, right here, it can move one space diagonally, or it can jump 2 spaces diagonally, meaning it doesn't capture anything that it moves through. But so that's sort of how it moves. And then once you've moved it, you're going to flip it over. And on the other side, there'll be a different movement pattern. It might be 1 or 2 spaces horizontally, right? It's going to depend on the piece. There are some like this assassin that jump and slide until they hit something. There are some that just that can strike without moving. Lots of different pieces, and there have been a few expansions that have added more. There's another game called the Jarl, which is compatible with it. It's just a different set of pieces on a different material. But some of those have some more complicated rules. I definitely prefer the Duke because although there is, a little bit to learn in the symbols, ultimately the pieces and the movement make a lot more sense in this. And I prefer, especially if you're teaching somebody the game, that it be a little bit more straightforward rather than less. But ultimately, you're going to be moving around and trying to take the opponent's Duke. If you do that, you win. I love it because it has an asymmetrical feeling. However, you've got the same piece as I do. It's just they're going to come out in a different order. Very interesting, very tactical. This would beat out chess any day of the week for me. And I really enjoy it. It's a game I'm always delighted when I have a chance to play. My number 3, the Duke. So let's move on. We're into the top 2 now. All right. The next, well, I almost said it. There we go. I guess I will say it. Santorini is my number two. Santorini is a Greek mythology themed game in, in which you've got these two or sometimes more people, and each turn you're going to move them and then do a build action, which means to place one building piece onto the board adjacent to your figure in any of the eight directions. So that's really what you're doing. You're going to move and build. You can move up one level, and you can cap these buildings as your build instead. It just sort of makes that impassable terrain. The ultimate goal is to move up onto the third level on your turn. If you do that, you win. There are a couple of other ways to win. You can prevent your opponent from completing a turn, or there are some characters that have their own special ways to win. And if you have one of those, that can be, for example, there's one that needs to win by jumping off a certain number of floors, or there's one that makes it so the opponent can't move down. And so if ever the opponent can't move based on that rule, that player would win. There's a lot of, as I mentioned, I guess I led with that. There's a lot of different special abilities, and you're going to play with usually one each game, and then you can switch them or try something else. There's 40 or 50 different ones, I think, at this point. I might be exaggerating, but there's definitely a lot. And so that's going to add a lot of variety to your game. Some work, some are easier to play with, some are harder. Some fundamentally change what's going on in the game. Some I like less, but either way, it adds a lot of variety to the game. But the game itself is super simple. You can learn the rules in just about 30 seconds. I almost taught them all to you there. And it's really that simple. You're going to move, build, and you're trying to move up, or obviously trying to prevent your opponent from doing so. It's very fast. You can play a few games of this while you're waiting for somebody else's game to get out, I guess. It does say on the box that it's 2 to 4 players. That's a lie. It's just a 2-player game, as I always say. But it's a really good one, and it's a really nice way to do an abstract game without a lot of heavy rules, but enough variety to make it interesting each time. My number 2, Santorini. And so now, let's move on to my number 1. Alrighty, my number 1 is another game by the same designer and in the same series as my number 6 was, and that game is... It's really my number 1, I guess, because I was so excited I hit the number 1 button again. That game is Blitzkrieg, World War II in 20 minutes. So Blitzkrieg is a game where one person plays the Allied forces and one person plays the Axis forces, and you're trying to win World War II. Sort of, right? What you're really doing is placing tokens on a board and trying to move, oh, that's the expansion, and trying to move on these tracks. I don't know why I can never find one. Here we go. Trying to move on these tracks and have it be on your side when something scores. You'll see that there's a certain number of spaces. Blue, and you have a number of tokens behind your screen. They're going to be blue, they're going to be green, or they're going to be, I guess there's some yellow ones. And ultimately, there's going to be a ship, a plane, or a tank, I guess is a better way to put it. Ships go on water, planes go on anything, and tanks go on land. And when you place a token, you're going to get the bonus that's under it. Plus, you're also going to move your marker toward you by the value of that token. So, for example, this 2 ship here, if I placed it in this spot, I would move the token toward me 2 spaces, and then I'd also get this bonus. You can win in a couple of ways. If your opponent can't take a turn for some reason, you win, or you're trying to get to a certain number of points. I think it's 25. And if you get there first, you'll win. Very simple. It really is a 20-minute game, often less. The rules are super easy. There are a couple of symbols to learn, but once you know them, you can get a game out of this in really 10 minutes and play several times. It's one of those games I'm always in the mood for. It's a nice way to abstract a World War II type game. Some people have compared it to Twilight Struggle. That is not a fair comparison at all. They are nothing alike, but you are moving. I guess Twilight Struggle has a track that is kind of a tug of war track as well. There's an expansion that takes place in North America in a fictional world where the Japanese have conquered and the Germans are invading America, and that's not the American map. Here you go. Or not. Well, doesn't matter. And there's Godzilla in it. But ultimately, it's the same game either way you play it. It's great. It's fast. It's not super heavy. Super easy to learn, though. A lot of fun. My number one abstract game is Blitzkrieg. And there we go. Got a little over this time. I'm sorry about that. Maybe it was the technical difficulties with that number one button being pushed again. Doesn't matter. Either way, go ahead. Let me know if there's some abstract games you think I missed. There are a lot of good abstract games. There's a few bad ones too. But I would love to hear what you think. And anyway, I thank you for joining me for another episode of Wednesday Whimsy. It's we'll see you again in another week, and it's been a lot of fun. All right. Bye-bye.